If you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here.
Anyone who doesn't have to be here doesn't have to be here. You know that's not true, right? I signed my last contract.
All right, everybody, what's up? How you doing? Mike Dolce here, four-time world MMA trainer of the year. We're going to get right into the Francis Ngannou UFC botched negotiations. I'm going to show you something that nobody else is talking about. I don't know why. Is it intentional? I don't think so. Is it they just skipped it? Possibly. I believe the problem here, ladies and gentlemen, is there is an inherent bias amongst everybody who's looking at this. Everybody who's looking at this wants to see what they want to see. They're not giving themselves the emotional perspective to see what actually happened. This goes for the UFC. This goes for Francis Ngannou. This goes for all the other YouTubers, because I haven't seen this mentioned. And all of the traditional journalists, they're missing this key point. So I've cut up this video a little bit. I'm going to walk you through it. Now, I have to give credit to Francis Ngannou and the Francis Ngannou YouTube channel. I have parts of his video that are in my video, and the link to his full video, you definitely should watch it. Also, Ariel Helwani's MMA Hour, it's my favorite MMA show. The full video is below. I have a few clips from Ariel's show with Francis for fair use to give my own editorial on this, but definitely watch the full interview. Ariel does an amazing job interviewing Francis in a special show on this. Now, let's let Francis here and Ariel talk. So this quick clip is Francis talking about when he first signed his last contract with the UFC in 2017.
Contract in December 2017. Even at the time, I knew it wasn't a good contract, but I know I have to earn my position, become a champion, have more value. In order to negotiate a better deal for me, I need to add more value to myself. And that's what I've been doing in the past 5 years, you know, and which is okay. I never really complained with that contract, no matter what happened. The only thing that I wanted is the right to deliver that contract, to terminate that contract as I should, and move on into the next one. You know, I do believe that I have that right, at least. I mean, that's called freedom, you know, to be able to terminate a contract in order to start another one. And if the new one doesn't suit your condition, you're also free not to sign without going into a bad blood, you know. So that's how I feel about it.
All right, so let me pause this right here. Let's talk about this very briefly for a minute. And this is from Francis Ngannou's personal YouTube channel. He's saying, listen, I signed a contract with the UFC in 2017. I wasn't in love with the contract. I didn't think it was a great contract, but I was happy with it. I was happy to fight through the contract, and I was happy to prove my value inside the UFC. And that's very honorable. That's the way it has to be done. You have to show your worth to the company, to your employer, in order to get paid more money, right? That's the whole part of this game. You guys understand that. What Francis also says here is important, and it's not being discussed. Now, this isn't the main point. This is a sub point. He's saying, listen, it is my right to have a contract in front of me, and I can choose not to sign that contract if I don't feel that contract matches my value. Francis Ngannou is telling us point blank, he did not feel he was valued by the UFC. So he decided to walk away. That is the issue. So Francis didn't get cut from the UFC. Francis didn't quit the UFC. Francis didn't have a hostile negotiation with the UFC. The UFC offered them their belief in his value. He did not believe their offer was worthy of his perceived value. Is he worth more? We'll see. But now we're going to talk about the exact points of the contract and where this whole thing did actually blow up.
I think that kind of like I was willing to compromise over and over and over and over. And I get to the point that I'm like, okay, I understand that I do want this, but guys, give me a break. Like, give me something, you know? And I'm not asking for a sky.
Do you believe that the deal that they were offering you, just money alone, do you believe it truly would have made you the highest paid heavyweight?
I don't know. See,
So let me pause this right here. What the UFC had said, Dana White had said that they offered Francis Ngannou a contract that would make him the highest paid UFC athlete in the history of the UFC. It would make him the second highest paid athlete in the history of the UFC, second only to Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor has proven his value, proven his worth. So Conor McGregor is the highest paid athlete in the UFC. Francis Ngannou would become the highest paid athlete in the heavyweight division, better paid than Daniel Cormier, a two-division world champion, better paid than Stipe Miocic, the most decorated UFC heavyweight champion in the history of the organization, better paid than everyone else in the history of the UFC outside of Conor McGregor. So when you say he said in the beginning, guys, just give me something, give me something, give me something. You have to stop and be like, hey, time out, dude. Time out. Like, to be fair here, the UFC gave you the second highest contract in the history of the organization. I don't hear anybody really giving credit to that. I don't believe, and I'm gonna say something here that's gonna be controversial, not because I dislike Francis and not because I don't think he's a good fighter. I don't believe Francis Ngannou is worth being paid the largest contract in the history of the UFC. I believe Stipe Miocic, the most decorated champion in the history of the organization, he has a right to say that he deserves that. You could look towards Daniel Cormier, a two-division world champion. You could make a case for Daniel. There's other great athletes in the lighter divisions that you could make a case for. But I only say this because I feel the UFC, and I know a lot of the contracts behind the scenes, I feel the UFC was being very generous, monetarily speaking, offering Francis Ngannou and the second largest, because I know the numbers, the second largest contract in the UFC history, the largest in heavyweight history. But Ariel's going to probe this a little bit more with Francis.
I don't know what other heavyweight made.
What I had heard through the grapevine is that Brock made around $8 million for 200. Is it above that or less than that?
For the John fight, around that.
Okay.
So Francis just says yes. For the John Jones fight, the UFC offered him around $8 million. The UFC, they offered him a contract that would make him the highest paid heavyweight in the history. So Francis' story matches the UFC story. The UFC doesn't appear to be lying, and the UFC, they want to be able to say, hey, we gave him the biggest contract in the history of the heavyweight division. So from a negotiation perspective, Francis has done pretty well right now. He just got the highest payday in the history of the heavyweight division. But let's move on.
Okay. So was this a multi-fight deal that they were offering you or just a one-fight deal?
Multified you.
And how many fights?
I asked for 3 fights.
So now it's not an $8 million deal. This is an excess of $24 million deal. Because as long as Francis wins, his purse goes up. His purse goes up. If Francis beats John Jones, Francis comes back, beats Stipe Miocic in his second fight, which is the next fight. John Jones gets one win at heavyweight and then will get an immediate title shot. Francis then fights John Jones in the rubber match, the biggest fight in heavyweight history. Francis Ngannou will make in excess of $8 million for the next 2 fights after the first. So this is a minimum of a 3-fight, $24 million deal. Most UFC fighters fight 3 times a year. So this is a $24 million 1-year deal, but let's say it's over 18 months. He fights once every 6 months. Just to be clear here, I want to show you the numbers, the real numbers. Now let's go a little bit deeper because something very, very important is about to be said.
They say they will give that
deal that they were offering you, or just a 1-fight deal?
Multifight you.
And how many fights?
I asked for 3 fights. They say they will give that exceptionally for me. I asked for 3 fights.
Okay.
So they, and Francis admits this, and nobody's talking about it. The UFC made an exception for Francis Ngannou and agreed to his hard ask for a 3-fight deal. Conor McGregor doesn't have a 3-fight deal. They gave Francis Ngannou a 3-fight deal. The UFC wants an 8-fight deal. They lock their champions up for 8 fights. You re-sign with the UFC, you are getting an 8-fight contract with elevators built in. They gave him a 3-fight walk-away deal, and Francis even said they made an exception for me. That is the biggest ask of this entire negotiation. Why is that? Because let's say Francis beats John Jones, he beats Stipe, and he beats John Jones for a 3rd time. Francis Ngannou can then walk out of the UFC and fight anywhere he wants. The UFC gave Francis the platform to build his brand so big, he becomes a bigger name than even Tyson Fury. Francis Ngannou walks out of that 3-fight deal as the true A-side in a fight with Tyson Fury. Right now, Francis is the B-side, and a little B, I should say. He beats John, he beats Stipe, he beats John a 2nd time. Francis becomes the A-side. He truly becomes the baddest man in the planet, and the UFC can't do anything about it. That is the biggest ask in this entire contract. The UFC never does that. The UFC doesn't do that for the kids making 10 and 10 on the prelim card. They don't do that. They definitely don't do that for their champions, in which they invest tens of millions of dollars in marketing that champion as the baddest man on the planet. Like, nobody's talking about this. That is the biggest ask of, that's bigger than the $8 million deal, the $8 million per fight deal. Way bigger, way bigger. Now let's go a little bit deeper into this.
Okay. And so
no extension, no extension.
Just 3 fights. Did you have the fights in your mind? Like, who were the 3 guys
3 fights, no extension
that you wanted?
Well, 1 was John Jones, 2 was Stipe, hopefully John Jones again. Out of that 3 fight, I hope that 2 was John Jones.
Okay, I understand. Now,
2 fights with John, 1 with Stipe. That was the hope.
You mentioned the things that they don't talk about. You mentioned the things that you just couldn't, let go on principle. And I've had a lot of people ask me, like, what exactly are these things that he is referring to? Do you feel comfortable telling us what these things were, the sticking points, the true sticking points that you were fighting for that they didn't want to give up?
Well, it was a lot of them. Like, what I have learned is that you don't go in the table of negotiation expecting to have everything that you want. But at least you want your partner, you want the other side to, like, show a willingness, or at least try, So I asked for a lot of things.
I got to stop it right there. And I have to remind you that the UFC gave Francis the biggest fight purse in the history of the heavyweight division. The UFC gave Francis a 3-fight deal with no extension. What is he saying right now? Let's listen again. Listen to what he's saying. Knowing they gave him the biggest fight purse in the history of the heavyweight division and a 3-fight contract with no extension, walk away into the sunset that they never do for anybody else. Listen again.
But at least you want your partner, you want the other side to like show a willingness or at least try, you know. So I asked for a lot of things, which doesn't mean I was expecting all those things, but I was expect at least like a few or 1, 2 out of those things.
He was expecting 1 or 2 of the things he asked for. I got to be fair, Francis, you got the biggest purse in the history of the UFC. You got a 3-fight walk-away, no extension contract. Buddy, you just walked away. You just robbed the bank, dude. You literally robbed the bank. And the getaway car was given to you by the bank owner. Now, let's hear what he has to say, because everyone's talking about healthcare, but I want to break this down.
You know, first, I asked for a sponsorship, a right of a sponsorship, which we've been ripped off. We can't have sponsorship.
So he wants the right of his own sponsorship. I understand his desire. The UFC is not going to give that to you or anybody else. Why is that? Because the UFC owns the distribution rights to their product. Now, this is a false narrative because the athlete can be sponsored by anybody in the world. Ford Motor Company, Tesla, Mercedes-Benz, JP Morgan Chase, doesn't matter. ING Bank, doesn't matter. Anybody can sponsor the athlete. The athlete can have as many sponsors as they want. The only thing the athlete can't do is the athlete can't wear an unapproved brand or logo during any UFC-related events that are televised and distributed. Why is that? Because the UFC owns the distribution rights. So what Francis is saying is not true. It's not being understood. And I see a lot of people in the media. Now, I'll take a lot of heat for this. That's fine. I'll take the heat. I don't care. But anyone who gives me heat, you guys don't understand how this works. You don't own your business. You don't run your business. You don't understand business. You don't understand contracts. You don't understand trademarks. You don't understand distribution. You don't understand this. Now, I personally have suffered damages as a result of the inability for the athlete to wear branded logos. I no longer could wear the Dolce Diet logos during UFC events. My athletes could no longer wear Dolce Diet logos during UFC events. So I understand. I've had deep conversations with Reebok, with the UFC, with their legal, with Fox, with ESPN. I've had conversations with all of them. I understand these inside and out, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm going to break it down in very simple terms. The UFC owns the distribution rights. The UFC gets paid tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to distribute their product. That's their right. Like it or not, that's their right. I suffered financial setbacks, loss of revenue per se, as a result of that, but that's their right. It's their, if somebody were to be on the Dolce Diet YouTube channel, I could say, hey, if I'm going to put you on the channel, you can't wear that sponsor. You got to wear the sponsor that's paying me to keep the lights on here. Well, F you, dude, I don't want to do that. Hey, cool. You just won't be on my show. That's fine. Right? That is, or your show. That's the analogy here. Whoever owns the distribution rights, they have the final say. The UFC said, Francis, no. We won't give you the ability to wear the Condom Depot logo. Remember that, ladies and gentlemen, all the OGs? We won't give you the ability to put Condom Depot on your back, on your shorts, on your t-shirt, while we are distributing a product through ESPN and its affiliates worldwide. Because then Mercedes-Benz or Coors Light or whoever else, all of our other partners are going to say like, hey, why are you letting Condom Depot in, number one, tearing down the perceived value of our brand, and number two, shit, I can just pay this kid 10 grand and get my logo on his shirt instead of paying you $10 million. Now, I know how that sounds, but that's business. That's how business works. And many people will be like, oh, the UFC, they make so much money, they should just allow it. Do you know how silly you sound when you say that? Sure, they should. Sure, they should. And men should hold door for women's, and adults shouldn't smoke cigarettes, and nobody should drink and drive, and all the Ukraine and the Russians should put down their arms and they should hug it out. Sure, sure. In a hypothetical meta universe, sure. We can code that in. In the real world, the UFC, as every other organization, as the organization you work for that pays your salary, they're trying to get paid. You have to understand that to understand how to negotiate. So Francis is saying, I want my own sponsor. The UFC says, no. That's not a deal breaker, Francis. We're paying you $8 million plus to show up one night. The 364 other nights of the year, bro, you can wear whatever sponsor you want, anywhere you want. You just can't wear it inside the octagon or at the 2 or 3 UFC-related events. And it's a very small list. I've been through them. I know the list. It's a couple events. Not even all of Fight Week. Just a couple events. So that's not true. It's not true. Now let's listen on.
I have for health insurance, couldn't have. I asked for a fighter advocate, somebody in the board meeting who ripped off. We can't have sponsorship. I have for health insurance.
So he asked for health insurance also. And Ariel's going to ask a follow-up question. Ariel did a great job here.
Couldn't have. I asked for a fighter advocate, somebody in the board meeting who will advocate for a fighter. I asked for that. I couldn't have those stuff that I asked for, you know. But I just wanted to know that there is something that I do want, and I also want them to take that at least in consideration.
So Francis just said he knew they were going to say no. He knew they were going to say no to that. He just said he knew they were going to say no to the sponsorships, no to the healthcare, and no to the fighter advocates. But I just wanted them to consider that. He asked. They said no. Move on. Francis moved on. This is being missed. He didn't say, if you don't give health care to all those little athletes on the card, I'm not going to sign this contract. He didn't say that. He never said that. He never said he said that. But that's the way it's being spun. And that's not true. He didn't say that. He didn't want that because he even said, I didn't expect them to accept these terms. I just wanted to throw a bunch of terms out there so they knew that's how I felt. That's what was said. That's not an opinion.
You know.
Did they consider any of those things? Any of those kind of off the beaten path? None of them.
No.
Not a single one.
Oh, no. They say no, they don't do business like that. They say, yes, I can pay my health insurance and all that. I'm like, yes, I can pay my health insurance. At this point, health insurance for me is not a problem, you know. But how about those guys that still at the bottom make 10 plus 10 or lost a fight, make 10? They can really afford that health insurance, you know.
Let me pause it right now. Welcome to America, Francis. Welcome to America. And I don't say that because he's from Africa coming to America. I'm saying welcome to the country. Like all humans in the country, all Americans deal with that exact issue. For some reason, this gets me pissed off. For some reason, the UFC signed some 23-year-old kid to a 10-10 contract, and that kid somehow is entitled to this perk package. Does your job do that? If so, where's the job and why doesn't that kid go work there? And honestly, if you're making 10-10 in the UFC, this isn't a career yet, buddy. This isn't a career yet. This isn't the NBA. This isn't the NFL. This isn't the NHL. This isn't MLB. Don't act like the UFC is that, because it's not that. The pedigree of athletes inside the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, the NHL, the rank and file pedigree of those athletes is much greater, much greater than the average UFC athlete, entrance athlete. Now, when you get to the top 10, then it starts getting similar. So just because the toughest kid in your town amassed a 7-2 regional record and got a short notice call to step in and fight a UFC vet on the undercard, that has to be weighted. Now, let's say this young man wins or gal wins. He makes 10-10. She makes 10-10. 10-10. 12-12. 14-14. Do the math. What's that? 10-10 is 20 grand. Plus 12-12 is 24. So now we're sitting on 44 grand. Plus 14-14 is another 28. So 44 plus 28, he's got $72,000. Never do public math, they say. He's sitting on $72,000 now in his first year, not including sponsorships, which I think starts at $2,500 per fight. So he's got another 5 to 10 grand. So he's looking at $80K plus. That doesn't include all the other streams of income he or she can and should be making. Fight related or not fight related. What about all the other sponsors and appearances? Any UFC athlete can go to any car dealership and make $1,000 to $3,000 just to stand in their lobby for an hour. I make more than that. I can work every single weekend doing a seminar, doing a meet and greet, doing an appearance, and making a couple grand every single time I show up. Who am I? I'm the guy behind the guy. I'm not the guy or the gal. And don't tell me the fighters are so tired from training so hard, because I trained them and trained with them, and I know most of them. And most UFC athletes will tell you the majority of not just UFC, but the majority of high-level MMA athletes don't train that hard, that consistently. Their off season is not a 40-hour work week. They are lucky if they train 2 hours per day in the off season. Real talk. So when I sit here, ladies and gentlemen, and I share this information for you, now, I am an advocate for the fighters, and it doesn't sound like that as I sit here and speak right now. As a coach, I make a percentage of what the athlete makes. The more money the athlete makes, the more money I make. Right? So I am personally incentivized to see these athletes make as much money as possible. So why am I speaking the way I'm speaking? I'm speaking the way I'm speaking because the way you guys speak, the way everybody else speaks, the way the media speaks, the way the general MMA public speaks, the way the athletes speak will not get you paid more money. It hasn't. You've been talking like this for over 10 years now, and it is equated to zero. This has gone to court multiple times from multiple plaintiffs with multiple high-powered legal teams, and you have lost every single time. Your case sucks. Your evidence is weak. Everything you guys talk about is wrong. You're approaching this from completely the wrong perspective. Yet, the MMA circle spins and spins and spins and says the same stuff. UFC bad, Dana bad, athletes deserve more money. Yeah, what athlete? Athletes deserve health care. Do you know my business, my S corporation that I own and I run, co-owned with my wife, and we're W-2'd employees of our S corporation, exactly the way most UFC independent contractors should be established, but they're not. My business has a healthcare program for my W-2'd employees. Guess how much I pay for a family of 4? I pay less than $800 a month for one of the leading healthcare providers in the United States to fully cover my family. Less than $800 a month for a family of 4. As a single independent man or woman fighting inside the UFC, I would opt for a high deductible plan. I would likely opt for an HSA. Whole nother conversation, but those who know. Triple tax advantage. Inside my company, given to my W-2'd employees. And for a single individual, shit, that's going to cost $100 to $200 a month. Your copay will be a little bit more. Your deductible will be a little bit more, but the UFC covers the majority of your medical bills with regards to injury. Facts. So you need the UFC to pay for you getting a Z-Pack because you got a little bronchitis in the middle of winter when you were doing the Wim Hof cold plunge, drinking tequila, and you got a little coffee, so you got a Z-Pack, and you need the UFC to pay the $25 copay? Is that what you're saying? That's what we're talking about here? That's the negotiation? The UFC should cover that for you? That's the negotiation. Not how do you go from a 6-figure to a 7-figure value entity? How do you increase your top line revenue? Let's not talk about business. Let's not talk about ownership. Let's not talk about wealth. Let's talk about poverty. Let's talk about being a W-2 enslaved employee that begs for $200 a month health care. The narrative is wrong, my friends. The narrative is wrong. Retirement? Guess what? My company has a 401k program with a company match. So my S corporation established a 401k traditional and Roth with a company match for the W-2'd employees. So if you're worried about your retirement, are you investing into your own Roth 401k or your own IRA or Roth IRA? Every U.S. citizen has the ability right now to set up a traditional or Roth IRA and invest $6,500 per year, which will accumulate to millions of dollars by the time you retire. In addition, If you are a savvy athlete, you can also set up your own S corporation or other similar entity, setting yourself up as a W-2 employee of your business and your spouse. Now you can also contribute $22,000 per year individually into your Roth IRA or Roth 401k, and you can get a company match on top of that. You can retire with tens of millions of dollars, just like the plumbers out there, just like the HVAC technicians, just like the small business owners all over the United States who are doing the exact same thing, working 40, 50, 60 hours per week to build their business and create financial prosperity. So tell me why a 7-2 UFC first-time athlete deserves all of that. But that first-time UFC athlete has the ability to do it all on their own if they think like an owner, and not rely on the UFC to give them entitlements or any other business to give them entitlements. They can just use these same wealth building principles that other powerful entrepreneurs have used themselves. That's why the narrative is wrong here, my friends. Now let's finish this.
And I have been there, so it's something that's still in my...
Talking about healthcare.
You didn't like?
Listen, even the money wasn't that okay, you know, like, and I said this before. I said, like, you know, I'm okay of structuring a deal. It's not just money is not what you get right away. You can get a long-term money. You can get a long-term value out of a deal, which is more than money.
Smart.
You know. So, and I said this last time when Mick reached out because I couldn't come to an agreement with Hunter. I said it's not all about money. We can structure this. You guys can give me something, then we consider like I consider it more than money. You can give me an event in Africa. This is something that I asked. I said, you can give me an event in Africa that have a lot of value for me than the money. I'm willing to put water in my wine. If you give me something like that, you know, those were the things that I asked for.
And they said no.
Oh, no, they couldn't consider.
So basically what they were offering you was
the only thing that they kind of like, and at some point, I feel like I was slapped in the face with money. Like, okay, take the money and shut up. Like, and that didn't work pretty good.
Would you say though that they were just trying to offer you a regular UFC deal, meaning a really good UFC deal based on what other UFC fighters get?
So Ariel knows the deals as well as I do. He's like, that's a really good deal, Francis. Like, the UFC offered you a really good deal. Like, really good deal. Now, I got to go back for a second because Francis said, hey, like, the money was okay. We're the highest paid athlete in UFC history. Heavyweight. Okay, fine. He said, but if they would have given me an event in South Africa, well, that would have showed me that they cared about me. Dude, really? How much money do you think it would cost to host a UFC event in South Africa? $30 million as a starting bid? Just to logistically get the event. How much do you think it would cost to build public awareness, to promote the event, to fortify the stadiums, to pay off all the politicians necessary? Like, that's not my field, but I know enough about it. So everybody listening is like, really? You would have been happy if the UFC hosted an event for you in South Africa. Number one, don't you think the UFC would love to do that if they could? The UFC wants to unlock the entire world. Logistically, how much money do you think the UFC will have to spend in order to launch that event there? Way more money than they will ever pay you, Francis. So you would be happy, and instead of the UFC paying you $24 million plus over 3 fights, you would be way happier if they spend 30, 50, 80 million dollars to move an entire event to South Africa for you, where they still have to pay you the $8 million to show up. I don't get that, dude. I don't get that. What is that? What are you talking about? Oh, I would love for there to be a UFC event in South Africa. I would love to see at least one UFC event in every major country on every continent. There's no greater experience. I've been to so many sporting events in my life. The butterflies you get at a UFC event is the better than rock concerts, better than any pro sport team. That energy is amazing. I'd love for the whole world to experience that. But Francis, you would have been okay. You would have been happy. You would have called it a deal if the UFC said, okay, we will spend tens of millions of extra dollars to host an event logistically that we cannot put together in a country that we have very few connections. Almost none of those are trusted connections. But you'll be happy with that. Come on, Francis. That's brother, that is not the way it works. Everybody knows that.
But there was nothing extra attached to it. There were no concessions being made. They were just offering you a lot of money to take this fight with no extra concessions that you were looking for.
The concession, and this is the thing, nobody says it, the concession was the 3-fight walkaway contract with no extension. That was the biggest concession. People don't know. The UFC will give you one big concession. And they will tighten the screws on everything else. They're a business. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? Well, you want to come and buy some of my real estate? I own real estate. You want to come and buy some of my real estate? Guess what? We are going to the table. I will give you one thing to close the deal and nothing else. And that's kind. What more are they going to give? Now, I am pro fighter. Don't act like I'm not, and don't spin this. I am pro fighter. The more the fighter makes, the more I make. The more I make. I haven't gotten a paycheck from the UFC since 2000, maybe 15. Not one single dollar has come to me from the UFC, from Zuffa, from anybody else. It's all been from the fighters and all the other business entities that I run. So the UFC pays me nothing. I'm no issue, no worries. I don't care. I don't want tickets. I don't need tickets. If I want tickets, I can buy tickets. I don't care about that stuff. I don't even watch the events. I don't even watch the events anymore. I watch them on Tuesday or Wednesday on Fight Pass the following week after the big events. I don't care. I want to see the athletes make as much money as possible. And I've been fortunate to work with some of the most successful athletes in the game. And I get a percentage. I want to see the athletes make the money. But you're going about it the wrong way. You don't know how to negotiate properly. You don't know what to ask for. You have zero leverage. You're not using your leverage. Negotiation is about leverage. And you guys are not using your leverage. Now, in a future video, I will actually talk to you about my own negotiations with the UFC for UFC Fit. Did you know that I've actually negotiated 2 contracts with the UFC? One was for the Ultimate Fighter, and 2 was for UFC Fit, in which I was the creator of UFC Fit. And this was a deep, multi-month negotiation. We both walked away high-fiving, shaking hands, and made a ton of money together. How did we do that? Because we understood how to negotiate. I'll share that in a different video. So I'm going to let this video play out here.
Is that an accurate description?
Exactly. As an independent contractor, I have to look up to myself and do what's right for me. And everyone out there should do the same for themselves.
Boom. So that is the end of the video. That's how Francis ends his video on his channel. Again, links below. Watch Francis's channel. Watch Ariel Helwani's The MMA Hour Show. Watch those full videos so you get greater context. What do you think? Leave comments below this video. This was a lot longer than I thought it would be because I wanted to walk through this point by point. Don't get mad at me for telling the truth. Don't get mad at me for telling you exactly the way it works. Now, I'm like, this is not my money. It's not. I'm not cutting the checks. I'm not cashing the checks. This has nothing to do with me. I simply want to educate you so you understand. So the athletes listening right now, shit, Dolce's got a point. What is it? S Corp? Let me write that. S Corp again? Of Roth? 401k? The US.gov healthcare exchange. What's an exchange? Let me look that up. Healthcare? Really? Let me look this stuff up. Let me find a local small business owner that can mentor me. Let me figure out how to run my business like a professional and stop being a pot smoking, video game playing, wannabe professional athlete. Run your life and run your business like Shaquille O'Neal, like Tom Brady, like LeBron James, like a real pro athlete. Until then, you will be treated as nothing than a bar fighter. Prove that you're something more than that. Conduct yourself as such and watch the money flow in. You won't have to beg the UFC for health care. You'll be employing your team and providing them health care as a perk to work for your company. Anyway, I digress. Comments below. I appreciate you guys. Until next time. Boom.